Hey there, everybody. It is me, Chris Herman, here for another episode of On Deck. Today is episode number 89, and I thought that I would do a little bit of a twist. So today's topic is going to be the best albums of 1989 for episode 89. Do you get it? Okay, so let's see here. I've got a lot of props on the table, more than normal, because I'm going to be referencing some stuff. But some of you know that I graduated high school in 1989. Yes, can you believe that? What is that? God almighty, that's coming up on 33. I think that's what it would be, about 33 years ago. And so I graduated high school in 89. This is episode 89. And we're going to talk about, at least what one website says, are the best albums of 1989. And why would I do that? Well, I think it's pretty safe to say that by now most of you know that I'm a big music fan. I'm not like a super duper connoisseur. I don't, have like, a curated collection of vinyl that goes super deep. But I love music, love rock and roll, love all forms of music. And so I want to talk about it a little bit today. So if I think about the 1980s and music, and particularly by the time I was ready to graduate high school in 1989, I would not say that at that time I was a particularly big fan of any 80s music. When I was in high school, I got really into punk rock and hardcore. A bunch of friends and I, we started skateboarding and getting into just a lot of bands that really, changed my life and changed my outlook on music. And that's everything from, Black Flag and the Dead Kennedys, Suicidal Tendencies, the Circle Jerks, into the Bad Brains and Minor Threat, and just on and on and on and on. And that was really, if you were to look at the late 80s for me, my friends and I were really into punk rock and hardcore. And I realized some of the bands that I just listed actually started in the early 80s, but we didn't really get into it until about the late 80s. So, when I look back at the time and what my thoughts about 80s music, I wasn't really a huge fan. It was like Madonna and Janet Jackson. Of course, Michael Jackson had great albums in the 80s, and so did, the Police and Sting. I mean, so there's, now that I'm older and I look back at the 80s, there's a lot of really great music from the 80s that I really enjoy at this point in time. But at that point in time, I didn't think it was very cool. And so I wasn't really into the mainstream stuff. So it'll be interesting because I'm kind of going to just go, I've got my laptop here. I'm going to go through some stuff. This is a website called Paste Magazine. I don't know who the hell they are. I don't know if this makes them any much more or less of an authority on the topic. But according to them, the number one, and I'm going to start, now, you know what? No, let's do it in a countdown fashion. I'm going to go quick because we're just going to talk a little shit here. Let's just do like the top. We're going to do the top 20. So, according to them, the 20th best album in 1989 was the Indigo Girls, their introductory album called the Indigo Girls. I think they had that hit. Yeah, they did. Closer to Fine, which was a really nice song. I remember that more from college. Then you got Bob Mould, not sure how you pronounce his name, even though I have listened to a bunch of his work, including this album, Workbook. Bob Mould was in Husker Du. The Replacements, Don't Tell a Soul. The B-52s, Cosmic Thing. Of course, the big hit there was Love Shack. And just bear with me because I'm going to go through some of this stuff fast because I really just want to hone in on a couple of key ones. But B-52s, obviously huge during that period of time. XTC, Oranges and Lemons. Couldn't even tell you anything about that. Bonnie Raitt, The Nick of Time. That's kind of like more of an oldie, an oldie classic kind of album that I think my parents used to listen to. I think my dad and Kathy used to listen to that. Camper Van Beethoven, Key Lime Pie. Number 13, here we go. Janet Jackson, Rhythm Nation 1814. couldn't tell you a single song off of my mind, but I'm sure if I heard something, cool. But again, this is sort of like this, like how I'm responding to this list is sort of how I felt about 80s music, right? Bob Dylan, Oh Mercy. Okay, here we go. All right, so let's talk about this one. Number 11 is Nirvana, Bleach. So this was their debut. Of course, everybody knows Nirvana's first album, their second album, which was Nevermind, which was released, I believe, on my birthday, September 24th, 1991. And that album, like, there's the before that album and there's after that album, as far as I'm concerned, as far as a lot of people are concerned when it comes to rock music and what happened in the music scene. But in 1989, even though I was kind of into punk rock and hardcore, really didn't know anything about Nirvana, but that's when their first album, Bleach, came out. And so that sort of set the tone. Now, here's one that my friends and I were way, 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 way into. Number 10, Fugazi, 13 songs. It's the one with the sort of the burgundy red square cover. This album is fucking awesome. So this is the first album on the list here that I would say that my friends and I were really into, because we were all into the band Minor Threat. And so the singer of Minor Threat, Ian MacKaye, some people call it Ian Mackay, not sure which it is, but anyway, he and a bunch of guys went on to form Fugazi, which was like a really cool kind of post-hardcore, sort of noisy, punk rock band. Just fantastic, man. Fantastic artistically. The sound was great, super lean. They had a really great ethos where they never charged more than $5 or $6 a ticket for any of their shows. I mean, they just they walked it like they talked it. And Fugazi, 13 songs is just a tremendous album. The first song being called Waiting Room, which has this really cool bass intro. I love this album, and so I'm glad to see it here. So number 10, Fugazi, 13 songs. Here we go. Here's another one that I didn't get into until a couple years later. Didn't even realize it came out in 89 when I was in 89, is Nine Inch Nails' Pretty Hate Machine, which freaking killer album. Head Like a Hole, I think, was the opening track. This is the first album for Nine Inch Nails, Trent Reznor. Reznor. Yeah, it's Trent Reznor. This was his project. Of course, you all know who he is, and he went on for many years to put out a ton of albums via Nine Inch Nails, and also scored a lot of films. And this album, Pretty Hate Machine, is freaking awesome. It's the first album, and I didn't listen to it until I was in college, but it's the first album that introduced sort of more of that, at what the time they were calling industrial sound. So it like merged really hard, guitar-driven rock with more drum machines and synthesizers. And this is a classic one. I'm surprised it was released in 89, because to me that feels like a 90s album. Number 8, Tom Petty, Full Moon Fever. Great record. This has got Running Down a Dream. I think it's got Free Falling. I mean, it's got so many great songs. And, I've become a huge Tom Petty fan over the years. It's really, the guy's masterful in the terms of creating really great songs in the most simple way. Like when you, as a musician, my band, we play one song of Tom Petty's, but like when you learn Tom Petty songs, they're pretty simple in their structure, but that's the beauty in them. Like they're so simple, yet they're so fundamentally great. And this album, number 8, according to this website, Tom Petty, Full Moon Fever, great, great, great album. All right, number 7, Kate Bush, The Sensual World. I couldn't even tell you anything about that. Number 6, The Stone Roses. I feel like I should be able to tell you about it. Couldn't tell you anything about it. Number 5, The Cure, Disintegration. Now, I feel like this is something. Oh, it's got Love Song on here and a couple of others that I recognize, but I feel like The Cure is a band that I really need to go back and try to rediscover, because it never super latched. Like there's certain songs that I hear that I like, but it never really connected. But I can see there's some, Love Song is really the only song on there that I can really say. And actually my band plays that song as well too. All right, let's move on. Number 4, Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique. This is a great one. Now, this is where, their first album, License to Ill, I think that came out in 1987, I want to say, which, that had all like their big party boy rap, Fight for Your Right to Party, and a bunch of others. And that was like their big thing. But Paul's Boutique was when they came back with their follow-up, and they were sort of the mindset like they wanted to distance themselves from that like outrageous party boy thing and really start creating some interesting like artistic hip-hop, which they did on Paul's Boutique. I think this album, it was produced by the Dust Brothers. I think it's got High Plains Drifter and a bunch of others. Yeah, no, you know what? This is one worth listening to. Beastie Boys, Paul's Boutique. All right, here we go. Madonna, Like a Prayer, number 3. I mean, okay. It's 1989. I got nothing against Madonna. Number 2, the Pixies. I totally should be way more up to speed on the Pixies, and I'm not. That's number 2. And then finally, in 1989, according to this website, number 1, De La Soul, 3 Feet High and Rising. So this is another album that my friends and I listened to a good bit in college, and I think this one had like Biddies in the BK Lounge. I think it had Summertime. I think, don't quote me, but like De La Soul sort of paved the way. I think they were part of this whole group called the Brand Nubians. I'm probably going to get slammed for a lot of the things that I'm saying in this in this episode because I'm winging it. But they, along with particularly Tribe Called Quest, really created a much jazzier, more artistic footprint in the hip-hop community. And I guess, obviously starting in 1989 and then moving into the 90s. But De La Soul was definitely something that was routinely on the playlist at whatever house I lived with whatever friends I lived with in Fort Collins, Colorado, or Colorado State. So listen, this is not the definitive, 1989 list, but what I can say is there's a number of items on here that I didn't remember that they came out during my senior year in high school. Like, I just remember senior year in high school as my friends and I going into New York City, going to see shows at CBGB's, and we were really into like, Agnostic Front and Sick of It All. A lot of the straight edge bands, Youth of Today, Gorilla Biscuits, like that was our thing. And so 80s music, and particularly whatever might have been considered the top records of 1989, not really on our radar screen other than definitively Fugazi, 13 songs. But I wanted to do, this is just going to be a short episode, this one here, because I'm actually going to follow this up with episode 90, where I'm going to talk about the top albums of the early 90s, like 1990 through 1994, which, compared to what you see here, like when we move into the early 90s and music in the early 90s, it's just like you can't believe how many powerful, great bands and acts came out during that period of time that are still around now, but that radically changed the course of music, at least in my life and a number of others. So I'm not going to belabor this episode 89. This is really just more of a preliminary to get us ready for episode 90. But again, there you have it. The top albums, according to Paste Magazine. This is not even by sales. This is just somebody's damn opinion, and I'm reading it like it's gospel. But nevertheless, we're having fun. So there you go. Episode 89, top albums of 1989, the year that I graduated high school, which is hard to believe that was coming up on 33 years ago, ladies and gentlemen. As always, I thank you for taking some time out of your day to check out whatever it is that I'm sharing or whoever it is that I'm talking to here on deck. So without further ado, I thank you. Have a good day. And I'm going to prepare for episode 90 right now. Thanks.